Give us a second, guys. If you can see us live, got to do a couple admin things. Second, guys, if you can see us live, got to do a couple admin things. All right, getting set up. Get the pop out chat. Okay, everybody. Hi, Sean Dotson here with the Flip Side. I want to welcome you to the second episode of Flip the Script. This is the show where you, the guest, get to flip it on Flip, and you're in charge. It's your topic, your discussion, and it's something different. So I want to welcome you all to the first episode. And this is the beer drinking, non-PC beer drinking, thrill of the chase talking show. So tonight I'm having a Death Before Disco brew from a company called Left Hand Brewing Company out of Longmont, Colorado. So I'm going to pour this really quick. Justin, if everybody doesn't know, this is Minotaur Moreno, also known as Justin. So Justin, say hi to everybody.
Hello, my name is Justin. I'm a business intelligence developer from Dallas, Texas. I go by Minotaur Moreno online. I've been in the search since 2013, been on 1.5 boots on the ground, and I believe everything is in play, but mostly the poem, TTOC, and Too Far to Walk.
Great. So just want to say cheers to all of you out there in the chat room and in FinTube land. And I think it was actually William who was the FRB, but he got in here like yesterday and signed in. And then Jason Dent about an hour and a half ago jumped in here. So he got the second FRB, so to speak. So cheers to both of you guys. You drinking anything tonight, Justin? Or
I'm good for right now.
Right on.
I'm excited, though. I think this is going to be a good one.
Cool. Hey, Iron, I see you in there. So you guys know this. Justin does not have the chat room up. So if you guys do have a question of Justin directly, you can put the @ sign, the Flip Side, and I will see that and then direct the question over to Justin to answer. So if there is a question, most of you guys understand this. Just real quick, want to say hi to a few people in the chat room before we get started. So obviously, Red X, how are you? Sir Crow, Wayne Ross, Dirk, Sasa Johnston, Texas T, that's a new one I haven't seen. Colo Brado, that's a new one. I like that name. Hooli, Robert Slazinski, I always get that wrong. Jason Dent, Drawing Nye, Just Steve, Gay Delkin, Eugene, how are you? Davio 22, my brother from another mother. Iron Will, Iron, good to see ya. What's up? I already said Davio. 3D Bronze, Marty Bird, catching up with everybody, and JT. So again, guys, we'll welcome you to the Flip Side, Flip the Script, episode number 2. And again, on this, it is the guest that gets to pick the topic. So Justin basically kind of picked this topic that he wanted to talk about. It wasn't exactly how the title came out, a little bit different. And I'm going to let Justin explain that and why he came up with this particular topic. So Justin, you've got the con.
All right. The thing that I want to talk about today is in July 1st of 2016, Forrest said, "The solve is difficult for many searchers because their minds think the clues are tougher to decrypt than they really are. Some say they are trying to think outside the box, as if the solution lies somewhere out there. Until now, I've resisted telling them to get back in the box where their thoughts are more comfortable and flow more easily." And that's from Mysterious Writings Featured Questions Weekly Words, July 1st, 2016. The reason I think that's so interesting is because, like many things Forrest says, I think you can take it a couple different ways, right? Do you agree with that? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think absolutely we can take it 2 different ways. There's for me as a poem purist, I've always believed that the poem is what we need to focus on. But what really is that box? He's telling us to get back in the box. Is it meaning that at one point in time we were in the box and we were thinking a certain way? So are you taking it, I think, like where you're leading to, and I don't want to take that away from you, Justin, but I'll let you give kind of your answer to that. To me, I've always felt that it's trying to focus on what is important that we should be focusing on. That's kind of how I see as comment. Is it there's something important we should be focusing on, and we need to get back in that box of that information.
Yeah, the way that I took it was, I mean, you can take it a billion different ways, but the first things that came to mind was there was 2 literal things that I took, and then obviously what you were talking about, the metaphorical. The first one was what if he meant a box, like a box canyon, you know, like a GNIS kind of location. And so
Mhm.
what I did, and this is where I'll share my screen, right? I went to my little handy dandy list and I looked up all the ways that you can have the name box within the search area, thinking like, what if it literally is literal? Like he's
Yeah.
really trying to play on words and trying to trick you into saying like, ha ha ha, stupid. I'm actually talking about
Yeah,
box.
I'm actually giving it right away in your face, like get back in the box, as
Right.
in a literal interpretation. Sure.
Which would be hysterical. But then you go through this list, and I mean, this is just the state, the search states, and I mean, look how
Yep.
many box canyons there are. And what I did was I put the feature name. So this is anywhere where the name box comes up,
Yep.
state, and then what map it is. So if it's on a different map, you can assume that it's at a different place. So if you see like a box canyon here and a box canyon here,
Sure.
both in Colorado, one's in on the Fall River map, one's on the Farewell map. But I mean, you can see like as you go down this list and just go down and down and down, which again would be pretty funny if he could work it. So it was, I'm talking about like the one that I was thinking was in Yellowstone, there's that Icebox Canyon, you know?
Yeah.
And that was the one that instantly came to mind when he said it because I was already looking around that
Well,
area.
yeah, effort's worth the cold,
Right.
everything else. Yeah, there's a lot of things that could go. So you're looking at it in the literal sense, and I'm not saying this is one way. You're saying
Right.
one way you can look at it in the literal sense that he's telling you to get back in the box, as in like a geographical place, that it's physically a geographical place.
Right. And there's 356 if you take away the header row. That's crazy. Just the fact that there's 356 places named box within the search state. So that was
that are on the GNIS, or that you can find. If they're on the GNIS list, aren't they things that you can physically find on a topographical map, right?
You should, yes.
Yeah, you should.
In theory. And so these are all in the search. So then the second way that I was thinking was there's a quote that he had, and I went back just for this show, and he says, if it comes back, I'm going to, and this is from.
Well, hold on. There's one really quick question. I know you can't see it, that Huli asked, and it's a really good one. She said, "How does Justin's warm and box list marry?" Can you query that and see if there's like, ones on that are like warm box canyon or something that is close to warm, like comfortable box canyon, or lukewarm or hot box canyon? Whoa, that doesn't sound good. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, I think that's what Huli is saying.
I 100% agree. I understand what you're saying, and trust me, Huli, I have. I'm pretty sure that you already knew it. But like, if you put it in the database, I can query whatever you want, and so you can kind of come up with a combination. Is there anything with brown and something warm that's on the same map together or in the same vicinity or whatever? And so
and is this kind of like a hint of what's on your list that you put together?
Yeah, well, it comes from the same thing. It comes from the same database. I mean, because basically all I did was put in all the GNIS places, their elevations, their longitude, latitude, and then the map that they're on, and the state and the county. And so I can query whatever I want to query. And trust me, I've done that quite a bit.
It's out or whatever. There he goes. You're coming back. You're back.
All right. So where did I drop off?
I had just asked you, is this a piece of your GNIS list that you put together? That was the question I asked.
Yeah. I mean, this is just one way to look up the data. Basically, I have 200,000 different places on here with elevation, longitude, latitude, and map names and counties and states. Right. And so I can query whatever I want. So like in this case, I just quickly said, look up everything that has the word box in the placement, in the place name. So yeah, I can do whatever you want. But the second way that I was thinking about was for what if another literal definition would be from the altereddimensions.net on May 8th, 2015. He said, if it comes back, I'm going to grab a pocket full of sleeping pills, take a treasure chest filled with treasure and a copy of my bio, and I'm going to walk out into the desert. Sometime they'll find my bones and the treasure, and my bio will be inside the box. Inside the box, underlined. I mean. So at least they'll know who I was. And then when you go to Terry Scant, you can see just how many times he's used boxes in the terms for the chest.
Hey, Justin, go ahead and share that where you have that text written up. Or do you have that? We're still in.
Oh, sorry. I can share that. Sorry. That's what I was. So right here. You're going to see some of the other stuff that we're going to talk about, but so you can see, and so you can read it right here. And so what I did was I highlighted here because, and then when you go to Terry Scant and you start looking at his quotes,
Yep.
you can see just how many times he's used box. And what was really interesting was he said, get back in the box, and this says inside the box.
Yep.
But you can see how many times he's used the boxes in terms of the chest itself.
Sure.
And so when I first read it, and we can talk about this too, is I thought, well, didn't he say that one of his favorite things, he had so much fun over the 60 or 70 years that he's been doing this, that he wanted to give that fun to somebody else? And
Yes.
so I thought, well, what if he's saying, I mean, what if really the methodology that you're supposed to use for this is literally to like go find something? Like how did he find a really good painting, for example, right? Like he would have to research it. He would have to go make connections, do whatever. And then eventually he would find a painting that was worth the money. And so you would find that those were the kind of things that he enjoyed doing. So what if it's like that? What if there's something in the box like that frog or the jaguar's claw or the bracelet that tells you like, this is a hint to go research this, and it will give you a really big hint to figure out, kind of like how he used to go find paintings, where this chest is at. What do you think about that?
Well, I keep, for some reason, I don't know if it's on my end or your end, but I keep getting cut out a little bit where I lose you. But I kind of lost your train of thought. It's not your fault. It's something either on my end or something. Everyone's saying they can, Huli and I are saying, 23 Monaco are saying they can hear you fine. So it might be on my end, on something on my my internet here. So I apologize for that, guys, if that's the case.
All right. So where did you hear me last? And I can.
Well, you were talking about how his bio is inside the box, and how he has talked about that he wanted to give, back to the search community, those things that he's had so much fun collecting over the years. That's kind of where
right.
I last heard you. So.
Yeah. And then so what I followed that up with was, what if the methodology we're supposed to use is how like he would find a really good painting? He would have to go research it, make connections. Once he researched where he could find the paintings, he would go make relationships. He would make the relationships, and then eventually he could get to that painting that he really wanted, or like how he found other artifacts or whatnot. And so one of the theories was, what if he's giving us the hints actually in the box? Like you look at the frog, that pre-Columbian frog and that jaguar claw, and that means to go research something that then leads you to this other place on where to start, or the bracelet with the 22 turquoise beads.
Well, let me throw this back at you then. And I'm just going to pull something out that Toby's talked a lot about. What if we got nothing more from Forrest Fenn after October 25th, 2010? Forrest Fenn just basically put the Thrill of the Chase book out there, and then he was never heard from again. We would never know what was inside. We would maybe see the picture on the front of the Thrill of the Chase book, right? That I don't think it's got the frog on there, but they're, in the book, I think somewhere in there it's got the frog on there, but we wouldn't know. I think it's on page 133. We wouldn't know that was some pre-Columbian frog unless we did the research, and we wouldn't know for sure that it actually was.
Well, but it says it in the book, right? It says it's pre-Columbian frog in the book. And the jaguar claw.
It would be like page 130 or something, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It says
it'd be right there in Goldenmore.
It talks about the bracelet. It talks about the jaguar claw, and it talks about that's connected for whatever reason to the frog, the pre-Columbian frog.
Yeah, it talks about the Tirano and Sinew India necklace from Colombia. Talks about all the animal fetishes, the 17th Spanish ring, the Chinese human carved faces of jade. There's a lot of other things that he talks about. I don't think he talks about a pre-Columbian frog in here. I'm probably overlooking it really fast if it says it, but
you get the point. Like, so
absolutely.
Some of the items in the chest, and what if there's a connection somehow, like that solves where warm waters halt, for example. Like you research something, it gives you a clue and then, oh, by the way, somewhere in New Mexico, this also was found, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like it's the place where it was found, for example.
Right. Well, my whole thing about when he first mentioned getting back in the box is that it kind of, he didn't tell us that we need to get in the box. He said we need to get back in the box. And by him saying that we need to get back in the box made me believe that at one point in time, us searchers were really kind of focused inside that box, so to speak, whatever that box may be. And I think that's the debate and discussion we're having a little bit tonight, is trying to figure out what that box is. So what is that box that us searchers were in at one point. That's kind of, what do you get from that? If you just would have said, hey, you need to get in the box, that would be different than saying we need to get back in the box, right?
Yeah. See, I'm one of those people. I don't really necessarily think that there's just one way to go, and that has to be it. I think you have to leave a lot of your options open, and I think you just got to cast a big enough net that eventually you find something else that helps you. Oh, that's why that made sense, if that makes any sense. And so now that one's more likely to be right. And so that was why I went through the two literal ones. And then obviously we can go through the metaphorical one that you were talking about at the beginning. And that's kind of the one that I'm leaning to more, but I just wanted to bring up the other two because I thought that was kind of would be
there's a question directed to you from Deep Thinker, and Deep Thinker, I guess, I don't know, he said something. He said something earlier that something along the lines of whatever Minotaur says is completely wrong. I think he was just poking fun at you, but
I like Deep. I like we definitely I like Deep.
Hey, so Deep said, please ask Minotaur if he believes this is in line with Fenn's statement to simplify. Do you think that there's a correlation between get back in the box or simplify? Is that what you're saying, Deep? Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, if you're talking to me, like.
Well, that's what Deep Thinker asked you. Do you think that, this statement, which I'm assuming is get back in the box, is somewhere in line with his,
I definitely think it means simplify, but what does that mean really? Like, I mean, to an ant, an elephant's huge. To the world, an elephant's really small. Like, there's the simplify is completely
subjective,
relative. Yeah, and it's relative to who you are and like your perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, like if it's Icebox Canyon, for example, in Yellowstone, like that's pretty simple if that's the first place that you're looking. It's not very simple if you're thinking it's in New Mexico. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
And so it just depends what your perspective is, I guess.
Well, it comes to the perspective on what does he mean by get back in the box, or what does he mean to simplify? Are we completely overthinking this? Like he said, it's like the longer one thinks about this, the more we overcomplicate that. He said that I think in the 2017 6 Questions with Mysterious Writings, right after Jenny had asked him, what is your advice to new searchers? And he had said, no, new fresh eyes are what this thing is needed. I'm paraphrasing that. And he had said, I would advise new searchers to look for the clues in my poem and marry them to a place on a map. It seems the longer that one thinks about this, the more they overcomplicate it. And that's kind of like addressing all us searchers who probably you might consider veterans or been in this since 2010 or 2013 or 14, at that point in 2017, that these people were overcomplicating it because we were overthinking it, maybe.
And that's exactly, I went on my search last year, and then I literally was just like, after 5 years, I was just like, I'm starting anew. Like, I really need to focus on what he's telling us to focus on, right?
Yeah.
And that was go back to anywhere where he's giving us instructions on what to do, and then really think about where warm waters halt. Like, really just focus on that, like completely, because I was the guy looking for everywhere. I was looking in the poem. I was looking outside the poem. I was trying to find coordinates in the poem. I was trying to find the coordinates through references through the books. And then it's just like, where do you start? Where do you end? Like, how do you know that you're on the right track versus how do you don't know?
Yes, exactly. How do we know? And that was that whole debate that we had with Dale Davis DeCall and I was, we have no confirmations that we have anything right.
So you have to go to the man, right? And so that's when we're going back to what this is, right? And this is what Sean was talking about, the metaphorical, as far as making it more simple, get back into the box, make it more simple, go back to the beginning, kind of that kind of thing. And so if you do that, I went and got all the quotes for that. And so if I can read them really quick.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. Let's go through each one of them. Sure.
So instead, simply follow the instructions he's already provided us to find the chest. Just go do what I've already told you to do, right? And so, and I know we disagree on this. This is where Sean and I diverge a little bit, but I mean, at the same time, we're both trying to solve it, and neither one of us know that we're right. So in the dust jacket, this is my beck and call. Like, this is one of the most important things I think that people need to know that don't. Unlock the clues that are scattered among these pages, and you can go home with a bronze chest that is so full of gold and precious jewelry that it's almost too heavy for one person to carry. that's in the dust jacket of the Thrill
Yep.
of the Chase.
Yep.
This to me, and I know you might differ, but to me, what this means is this
Uh-oh.
gives you the
Hold
method.
on, Justin. I lost you again. Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. So it's on my end, not your end. So that's okay.
So they can probably hear me, but you can't.
Give it a second here. I don't.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. It's saying my internet connection is unstable. Uh-oh. Okay. So it's me that's dropping, guys. So it's not Justin. Go ahead, Justin. I can hear you now.
Okay. So to me, why I think this is so important, because I think this gives the methodology of what we're supposed to do. It says this doesn't say that we have 9, but we know we have 9 clues. This to me says we have 9 clues that we need to unlock, right? We need to, what does it say right here? Scattered amongst these pages.
Unlock the clues. Yeah.
Right. Unlock the clues, the very first word. And so to me, the methodology for how we solve this puzzle, how we do this puzzle, is there are 9 clues that we need to go through the book to the Thrill of the Chase and unlock them somehow. So we're going to have to figure out what the method is to figure out where the 9 clues are. And then once we identify where those 9 clues are that are scattered throughout, meaning the beginning where Warm Water Hawks doesn't have to be in front of the other clues, or, it could be vice versa. Once you do that, you have 9 places where you're supposed to go and you're supposed to unlock them. You just feel that everything's in the poem, right?
Yeah.
And so,
I mean, he's said, listen, and let me clarify this. He said just prior to the poem, so I wrote a poem containing 9 clues that, if followed precisely, will lead to the end of my rainbow and the treasure. So we know that the poem contains 9 clues, the 9 clues that we all know about. But he also says immediately following the poem, like you put in there are also other subtle clues sprinkled in the stories. And he's basically kind of told us that the book, contains the poem, but it also contains
You're freezing up on me. You're choppy. Hello.
And the book, and he said this before in an interview with CBS, As It Happens, and I don't know if it's me that's cutting out or what, guys, but he said in the CBS interview back in 2013 that he said the book itself won't lead you to the treasure, but there are hints in the book that will help you with the clues or help you solve the clues, is kind of what he said. So to me, it's like everything in the poem is the information that will lead us to the treasure if followed precisely. Everything outside of that, may only be helpful. And we don't know how they help us solve the clues. That's the key point of that. And Forrest Fenn has said that's part of the mystery and the fun of this, is trying to figure out which hints to use to help you with the clues, if you even need that help. So as a poem purist, I just think that they're so subjective that I focus mostly, just on the poem, trying to figure those things out. It doesn't mean I don't have fun going down the rabbit holes, but it just means that I know that stuff is completely subjective and may not give me any kind of, real solid answers.
Yeah. See, where I'm at with that is, and this is again where we diverge, is I believe the hints help you with the clues, that like what you were talking about. But I believe anybody theoretically could go and walk over and find the treasure eventually, like after 1,000 years, even though he says you can't do that. It's not likely. I think personally that you can also just use the poem and get there, but it's not very likely. Like I feel you need to have the hints in the book, unlock them to tell you where those 9 are, to realistically have a shot at really finding the chest, versus you feel like you can just use the poem. Yeah. And so, but the argument that I have with that is, if you are right, my perspective on if you are right, and it is just a poem purity, all you need is the poem. It's that easy. There has to be something in the poem that tells you exactly where to start. Like any good treasure hunt, like, I mean, literally, whether it's cryptically hidden somewhere within that,
sure,
there has to be a place that says, if you do this, that, and the other, it tells you, okay, here's where Warm Water Hall, and then you can do realistically the 9 clues.
And you're saying just in the poem,
right? Just in the poem. That's the only way.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Right.
I wholeheartedly agree that the poem will tell you the correct starting point. And I think that's where it goes back to those 2 questions with Phil Bayman and Steve R., where both of them asked very similar questions, which was, if we knew, or if we told somebody to meet us where Warm Waters halt somewhere in the mountains north of Santa Fe, could we find the correct starting point? And Forrest Fenn said, and I'm going to paraphrase based out of both these questions, no, you cannot go with confidence or confidently find the correct starting point with just those two clues. You're either oversimplifying the clues and you're not looking at the big picture, or you're missing some key ingredients, and you can't bake a cake. Those are kind of summarized.
You froze.
Yeah, it's on my end, and it's frustrating. I'm back here in our fourth bedroom, so it's
no worries. But can they hear me? Am I freezing too, or is it just you that's freezing?
They're saying you're fine. It's on my end. I opened up the door to the fourth bedroom here, hoping that the internet, I don't know if the 1-inch door, solid door is screwing up the.
I mean, we'll just go with we'll go with it. But yeah, so my thing is, and I'm not saying that you're wrong by any means, like, because I was also like, maybe that it is just done from the poem, but to me, you'd have to figure out that the place where in the poem it tells you where warm water's halt to realistically have a shot. And then if you're going my way, which is there are 9 clues, you have to find 9 places in TTOC that show you, okay, this tells you how to unlock that. Okay, you've unlocked 1. Now go find the other 9. Right. And so that's where I'm at. And so if we keep going to the quotes, let me share my screen again.
Sure, but wasn't he asked one time before by somebody, doesn't your subtle hints or something scattered in the stories also somewhat subtly hint towards the correct answer to like Homa Brown or where warm waters halt? And I think he had basically answered that question in the negative. He said, no, they don't. Sorry, madame, or something like that.
Right, but I mean, we'll go over it in a second. But I mean, the way that he words things, he knows exactly what he's doing, and he makes it sound like it's going one way when really it leaves him open. Like remember how like Bill Clinton used to have that word, but it depends on what the blah 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 definition of it is or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. It's a lawyer.
It's like lawyer wordsmith speak, and so it's just like he can wiggle out. You know what I mean? And he's really good at that. And so let me share my screen.
Wanted to say hi to Bill Gorman. I saw him in there. Bill, you can see your art's over here, so I will get it framed. I just haven't had a chance yet.
All right, so I have there are other clues sprinkled, and again, I think where we differ is I think the hints are the things that help you unlock each individual clue. So there's 9 different places in the book. Then what I did was I went back and I was just like, I mean, literally go back to the basics. And so I went through and I started getting all the quotes.
Read it. Let's read each one and go through each one of them.
All right. So they're pretty much all the same quote. Like you could tell, like this was a bullet point he wanted to say for all of his interviews.
There's a little bit of difference in those too, though.
Right.
That's what's interesting.
Right. And so that's what I wanted to point out because I think that's where he kind of screws up a little bit. But anyway, or at least that's a theory. So, in my book, there's a poem, like I said, and there are 9. And he's getting asked how one should go about attacking the poem. To solve it. Yep. Well, in my book, there's a poem, like I said, and there are 9 clues in the poem, and the clues are in consecutive order. So you already know that. If you can read that, if you want to find the treasure chest, you have my book there. I'll tell you how to do it. Read the book just normally, the poem and the rest of the book, and then go back and read the poem 6, 8, 10 times. Study every line, every word. Then after you do that, read the book again slowly with the idea of looking for clues or hints that are in the book that will help you follow the clues. So this goes back to the way I see it. Yeah. And you can find the chest with just the clues. You can find the chest with just the clues, but there are hints in the book that will help you with the clues.
Yeah. And that last line, a lot of people leave out. There's a lot of people that will read that whole thing and say his best advice is to, to go back and read the book, and study the poem and everything else, and then go back through the book looking for hints that are going to help you solve the clues. But they don't. They forget that part where he says you can find the chest with just the clues. And I've got to ask a lot of people, do you think and I'll ask you, Justin, do you think it's possible to find the chest with just the poem and a map? And then getting out there on boots on the ground. Right. Let me ask you this. Do you think you can find the correct starting point? Let's just get this really basic. Do you think it's possible to find the correct starting point with just the poem and a map?
That's the best. Theoretically, I could win the lottery, but it doesn't mean I'm going to win. I'm likely to win the lottery. And so the answer is I could, yes, I think theoretically I could find the exact spot that he wants to, but I don't think that there's, unlike you, I don't think that there's that place in the poem somewhere that gives you where warm waters halt.
Okay.
I think the book does.
Right.
But so I can answer your question as yes, I think theoretically I could, just like I could also win the lottery.
Right. Sure.
That makes sense. All right.
Yep.
So the next one is
But
pretty much.
do you think the poem gives us that opportunity?
I don't.
You
I've tried.
You don't think the poem alone gives you the opportunity to find the correct story?
And I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying.
So are you smarter than a little girl from India?
The little girl from India. The little girl from India has a poem, the book, and the map, right? Or does she just?
No.
She just has the poem and the map.
She just has the poem, a map of the Rocky Mountains, and she can speak.
Right. But can I win the lottery? I mean, she could win the lottery.
Yeah, she could win the. Well, she's got to come over to the United States and buy a U.S.
That's my point. Like, but that's my thing. Like, theoretically, she could find. He's right. Just like theoretically, I could win the lottery.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean I'm going to.
You have the odds to win the lottery. They're just not very good odds.
Right. Right. And so she has the odds, but they're just not very good odds. That's the way I see it.
Okay.
Not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, like, I've been in your camp. I've tried to find the GPS, like the coordinates and everything. I just cannot find anything that gives me
drawing nigh. I would agree that the little girl needs a more detailed local map. But I'll ask you, and I'm sorry, we'll get back on this Minotaur. But drawing nigh asked this one. But drawing nigh, ask yourself, can she find the correct starting point with just a generic map?
Realistic. I think realistically fine.
No.
I think is a better way to ask that.
Go ahead. What are we at now?
All right, number 4, and this is April, so it's a month before this, so it's obviously a bullet point. What I recommend is that you read my book normally, then you read the poem over and over and over again, and just think about. He always says, "Think." There's something to that. I don't know what it is, but there's something there, and just think about it. Think about every line. Read it 4, 5, 10 times, and then go back and read the book again, slowly looking for hints in the book that will help you with the clues in the poem. So that's pretty much a little bit less answer than that, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
This one, I think, and that's the next one that gets really interesting. But number 5, here's what I would do. Read my book in the normal manner, then read the poem over and over, slowly thinking. Then read my book again, this time looking for subtle hints that will help you solve the clues.
Yeah.
And that was July. So that's, the next month after.
Yeah. And a lot of his early stuff, that's what he's really trying to get people to focus on.
Right.
He's trying to say, hey, if you want my advice or my best advice or whatever on how to find this thing, if you're a serious searcher or whatever, then, get my Thrill of the Chase book, read the poem, study it 6, 8, 10 times or whatever, and then go back and read the book again, slowly looking for anything that pops up in your mind, an aberration that catches up in your mind. Any part of some is better than no part of any, right? Is that what he says? So again, in the very early time, he's really telling people to focus on the poem in the book.
All right. And then these next 2 are the ones that I think he might have slipped up. And this was right when Too Far to Walk was coming out. Okay. It was from that Moby Dickens bookshop. And I think this, in my opinion, and it definitely is confirmation bias, but there could be something here. So there are clues in this Too Far to Walk book, but there aren't any clues in the Too Far to Walk, talking about the Too Far to Walk book, but there are some hints. What I tell people to do, if you're really serious about looking for the treasure, get the Thrill of the Chase and read it, and then go back and read the poem over and over and over again, and then go back and read the book again. But here's where I think it's important. Yep. Slowly looking at every little abstract thing that might catch up in your brain. Mm-hmm. This is where he usually says, look for hints that might help you solve the poem.
So it's almost like he's telling you.
To me, why this is big is because this is telling you what a hint is. Like this is telling you looking at every little abstract thing. And so anybody that knows what abstract means, that's not necessarily a specific thing, a concrete thing. It's more of a class of things, right?
Yeah.
And so you go through anything that in the book that that talks about a class of something, like talks about it theoretically, and that's where a possible hint can be. And then add on to the fact that it might catch up in your brain. So somehow that abstract thing catches up in your brain.
Yeah, but what catches up in your brain, Justin, or what catches up in Sean's brain, and what catches up in Bill Gorman's or Toby's or Susie Finhaven's in here, or any of you guys in the chat room may be completely different. It's all completely subjective. We're all different people. So It is. I mean, abstract, again, like you said, is a whole class of different things, but then our brains are all completely wired differently. No people,
Right.
two people
But
are alike, you know?
and right, and it's definitely rolling the dice. So there has to be, if it's a good treasure hunt, and who knows if it is or if it isn't, but if it's a good treasure hunt, there's usually a theme to it,
Right. Sure.
and there's usually a theme of
Cheers.
there's usually a all the other armchair stuff that I've ever done that's worth its weight is it's not just arbitrary. It's
Yeah.
there's definitely a theme like that. Once you're done, you're like, oh, that was the theme of this, right? And so I would imagine it has something to do with fishing or finding arrowheads or something. But
Sure.
I have theories about that too. And anybody that's read my essay knows what I think the answer to the abstract thing that I think he's pointing at is. But and then so he says that might be a hint to help you with the clues. So
Yeah.
now we know, we've defined what a hint really is. It's a little abstract thing that catches up in your brain.
Well, and that's kind of and I'll tie that into the definition of subtle, right? He said there's also other subtle clues sprinkled in the stories, and the definition of subtle is something that is so, what is it? So delicate or precise as to be difficult to analyze or interpret. And that's kind of like abstract, right? I mean, if we look at the definitions of subtle and abstract, they might be somewhat closely synonymous. Maybe I'm completely wrong on that.
I mean,
but
philosophically, abstract is definitely like everybody should after this look up the definition of abstract. And there's a lot of YouTube videos on concrete objects versus abstract object that I would strongly recommend because it definitely will have you looking at the book very differently once you know the real definition.
Which I want to bring something up really quick now that you say that. There is a really good YouTube video that came out by a guy that's a channel called Quest to Cease. A guy by the name of Jack put out a video called Cognitive Bias. And he really goes into the different definitions of biases and how it really applies to the treasure hunt. I know a lot of people have seen this, but if you guys haven't seen this, I'll put a description, or I'll put the link in the description below this video so you guys can go find it. But that's an awesome video. So sorry, I mean to jump that in there, but you were talking about that, and I think it kind of tied in. So go ahead, keep going. My internet that's what unstable again.
That's what flip the script is, right?
Right.
And then the last one that I think is important is regarding the thrill of the chase. How many clues? How many hints? Somebody asked that at the Moby Dickens, if everybody remembers that. Yep. And where I think people get lost was I always remembered this number 6 quote. I always remembered that abstract thing as being an aberration.
Sure.
And so when I went back, I was like, oh, those are two completely different things. So I was always looking for where I always thought what this number 6 quote meant was, when he screws up the story for Ernest Hemingway and he gets the wrong book. Well, I thought that's an aberration. So that means that's where the hint is. All this time, when I went back and did this, I was like, oh my God, this abstract's it's like a group of things. Anyway, so regarding the thrill of the chase, somebody asked how many clues, how many hints in the thrill of the chase, and he said there are 9 clues in the poem, which we all know. But if you read the book, there are a couple, and a couple we all know what that means. That means 2 or 3, right? And so,
see Mama real quick, okay? Sorry.
So what we know is there are a couple, which Forrest has defined that as 2 or 3 good hints. And then there are a couple of aberrations. And after doing this, I also figured out that what aberration to Forrest means, because it's on Dow's blog, he has an aberration section. And he says an aberration actually means to Forrest, it means ideas that don't precisely fit within a present discussion, that live out on the edges. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. So the breakdown of this one, at least from my perspective, and I can get your take on it, is there's only 2 or 3 really good hints. So to me, what that means is, and if you've seen what I've done on other channels about the 200, 500 foot searcher, to me, that means you can get the first 2 right, and then you can walk past the other 7. He says something like that. I'm paraphrasing. So to me, what this means is there's a very good possibility, at least in my mind, that the 2 or 3 really good hints gives you where Warm Waters Halt is, either the canyon or what Too Far to Walk is, and the canyon. I mean, the Homer Brown, because that gets you. And I think,
but to me, that goes contrary to what he answered that one person when they ask in a more subtle way.
I'm giving you 7 quotes that argue your point,
right?
Against your point, I mean, I guess. And so that's what I mean. Like, you can go both ways. Like that's what I've always said. For everybody that says they have a quote that Forrest said something that makes sure that this is right, I can find you one or two other quotes that completely contradicts that quote that will make you think he's thinking.
And that's why secondhand information and everything, there's just, like I said, there's so much noise out there that we just, it's so hard to focus and remain objective.
Right.
We do interpret. I mean, our interpretation of Forrest Fenn's words are not confirmation of his intent.
Right.
You know, I mean, we do that with our wives all the time. And maybe you do. I mean, I do it all the time when my wife says one thing and I interpret it a different way. And
right.
next thing you know, we're upset with each other because I interpreted her meanings the wrong way, you know,
right.
and got her dish towels and not a new necklace, you know? So
right. yeah, my wife, she came in and she was making like partridge or something. Like we were having our second baby and like she had all these clues that we think she was pregnant. And like, I completely, like literally for the rest of my life, she could have been having those clues and I would have never gotten a million years. But she thought they were like so obvious. And I was just like, so it's definitely.
We don't pick up on that.
But anyway, so to me, the 2 or 3, like it would make the most sense if it's a good puzzle, to at least in my good puzzle, that it would be like the first 2 or 3 that really help you start. Because once you get started, that's really the name of the game, right?
I'm not, see, my whole thing is I don't debate that there are hints in the book, subtle hints or whatever that can help you with the clues. I don't debate that at all. I mean, the architect of this whole treasure hunt has told us that, so we shouldn't deny that. What I'm saying, to me, I think that they're just so subjective and they're so hard. And I get what you're saying. I love what you're talking about because that's not a way I've ever looked at it before, where you're saying abstract and aberrations and some of the other things you said are really like, oh, wow, that does kind of make sense. I like that, you know, but I think there's one other quote and I'm hoping you'll get to it that really,
the next one. Yeah, it's the next one.
Yeah, that we can talk about. But
right before we get to that, I want to make a point, and here I am giving something away of what I really do think. And that is, if you read this, so there are a couple of really good hints, right? Which means 2 or 3. And then there are a couple of aberrations. And again, what I said, it comes from Dow's blog, his section of aberration, where it says ideas that don't precisely fit within a present discussion.
Sure.
Live out on the edge. To me, is there anything that more defines this ideas that don't precisely fit within a present discussion than no place for biddies? Like, is there anything in TTOC that is more well-defined by this as so that means no place for biddies is an aberration?
How would you, why would you say that chapter
because it makes, when you're reading the book, it makes no sense. Like it doesn't flow. All the other stories, it's about him growing up and he's eventually learning how to learn capitalism, right? Like and become a warrior. And so it's all, but then there's just this random.
Where does that fit in the scheme of things? I don't know. Like somebody probably knows the chapters. Like it's like the 4th chapter or something, isn't it?
Yeah, it's relatively early in the book, and it's only like 2 pages, and it's all he can't talk. He can't. His parents wouldn't let him cross the street, and two ladies at a church social. Yeah, 2 ladies at a church social are making fun of him, and it just does not go at all with the rest of the book. And to me, that is precisely the ideas that don't precisely fit within a present discussion.
Yeah. So it's tucked in between the chapter first grade and jumpstart the learning curve. No place for the biddies. So he's talking about school. You're right. He's talking about school, everything else, starting out in school. His father was a principal. Then all of a sudden he goes into this, no place for biddies right in the middle of this, and then goes back to jumpstarting the learning curve. So it's in between talking about school that he throws in this short story about that. And you're saying because that doesn't fit with kind of how the timeline of things, that you're seeing that as an aberration, or
I'm saying that
something is abstract. Yeah.
Right. Well, to me, it's what he defines from my perspective. And again, everybody sees things differently, but to me, what that highlight ideas that don't fit precisely within that is exactly what No Place for Biddies is. So that to me is an aberration to Forrest.
Sure. So what do you take out of that chapter that you think that could be a subtle hint? Do you think that that's directing us to a place?
Crossing a street, something about crossing a street or crossing something, or because he also said, don't step on a crack and break your mama's back. I always remember that one. I mean, there's a lot of things that could, but again, like you said, it's rolling the dice and which one is the hint?
Deep Thinker is saying, he says, no place for biddies. He also thinks is an aberration, but he thinks it follows the theme of Fenn having a low self-esteem, which kind of does, breed into that, where, John Charles, whatever, was saying he wanted to beat him up just to see how high he could jump, or how high you would go. And then, these people talking about or alluding to how dumb Forrest Fenn is, or they might not even been talking about Forrest. Forrest just happened to be in earshot, and he believed they were talking about him.
Right.
I mean, who knows? They could have been talking about some other kid, and Forrest Fenn, because his self-esteem was already low because somebody gave him a book called Kismet, and he thought Kismet was talking about him. He also thinks that these old biddies were talking about him,
Right.
and then I mean, who knows?
I hear what you're saying. I just think, to me, it still sticks out like a sore thumb.
Yeah,
like
no,
it just doesn't. And I mean, again, to each his own. But to me,
well, I mean, it sticks out to me because I look at it as there's no place for the meek. Biddies are kind of meek, Well,
biddies are chickens. Like biddies, like if you look at what biddies are chickens. And then he talks about
they're a bunch of hens pecking the ground. They're just talking.
Right,
trauma.
And then
talking rumors there,
But is he just trying to be funny when he says, "Okay, so we know that biddies are hens and chickens," and then he talks about crossing the road?
Yeah, that is kind of funny.
Is that just to make it funny because if you know what a biddy is, or is that because there's a hint there?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's Forrest Fenn's sense of humor. There definitely could be something there. Absolutely, I'm not saying there's not hints in there. It could absolutely be one, but to assume that we believe it is or know before we ever, recover the treasure is very subjective.
Oh, I 100% agree with that. And that's why I also think he says you're never going to know for sure that you're right until you've found the chest. And so, I mean, that makes, and then this is the one that we really disagree on, which I think is funny because I wanted to put in there because I know we both see it completely different, which is completely fine as long as we're civil about it. Be civil and debate. You don't have to
we'll just make a bet on it.
Right. Yeah. Huge bet. Right here.
All right. Here we go.
Let's go. But anyway, so here's where a quote that Sean often uses that bugs me because I feel like he leaves out the context of what the question is.
Yep.
And fair's game. Sean thinks one way, I think the other. So the question was, "Dear Mr. Finn, we are a group of avid elderly bridge players in San Diego who after reading your book, hope to find your treasure. We are not into poetry as much as the memoir. We realize the clues are in the poem, but we're wondering if there isn't at least one clue in each chapter. Thank you for the great book. Sincerely, Emily." Forrest says, "Emily, all the information you need to find the treasure is in the poem. Just like I can win the lottery, in my opinion. The chapters in my book have very subtle hints, but are not deliberately placed to aid the seeker. Good luck in your search." Can I go first, or do you want to go first?
No, absolutely, go.
Okay, so where I feel like you're leaving out the context of what this person's really asking is they're not asking, are there, like, can you solve is this, are you saying that all you need is the poem, you don't need the book? What they're saying is, I'm trying to do the exact opposite. They're trying to solve the hunt with just using the book and not the poem at all. And so he's saying you need the poem, and there are hints that aren't deliberately placed, meaning, so like what I was talking about, like there's 9 things that you have to go find and figure out, but they're all over the place. So if you don't know that, there's no way that you put them in consecutive order and go find the treasure. You have to have the poem because the poem puts them in consecutive order. It makes sense of it all. What do you think?
Well, I think, what they are asking here. Oh, now you dropped it out where I can't see it anymore.
Oh, sorry. I'll drop it.
No, pop it back up really quick so I can see it. But yeah, I mean, all the time I see that where Forrest Fenn says all the information we need to find the treasure is in the poem. And he's telling that to this bridge players, but he's also telling it theoretically to all of us. But he says, we are a group of avid elderly bridge players in San Diego who after reading your book, hope to find your treasure. We are not into poetry as much as the memoir. So they're not into the poem as they are into the memoir and understanding him and everything about him. And they admit that they realize the clues are in the poem, but we're wondering if there isn't at least one clue in each chapter. So their question is they are asking, is there at least one clue in each of the chapters? Now then he turns around and tells him all the information you need to find the treasure. He's speaking directly to them, that you need to find the treasure is in the poem, period. That's where he ends that. Right. He says the chapter's in my book because they ask him, but we're wondering if there isn't at least a clue in each chapter. So he answers that second question by saying the chapters in my book have, now he says very subtle hints instead of subtle clues or anything else. He says very subtle hints, but are not deliberately placed to aid the seeker. Now, the way I read that is that, yes, all the information we need to find the treasure is in the poem, but the book has very subtle hints that are not deliberately placed to aid the seeker. Now, we know the hints, those subtle clues or whatever that are in the book, Forrest Fenn says this many times, can only help solve the clues, can only be helpful. And that's kind of what he's saying here. These, subtle hints that are not deliberately placed to aid the seeker. Now, you can look at that two different ways. He says they're not deliberately placed to aid the seeker. Now, what that basically can mean is he didn't intentionally put them in there to help the seeker, but we know that these subtle clues will help you solve, the clues themselves, not solve, anything else, but to solve the clues that are in the poem. So what I like about the fact that he's saying deliberately placed. So deliberately to me means intentionally, willfully, purposefully, done. And he's saying they're not. Now, when you go back and he talks about, other books he's written, he talks about intentionally or deliberately making mistakes in those books. And I think one of them he actually talks about is in his Sharps book, where he said, uh-oh, my son's upset. Can you hear that?
Uh-oh. You got shot.
My wife's got him. Yeah. Man down. My wife's got him. But he says in his Sharps book that, the Indians at Taos Pueblo practice adultery like the Catholics, and he said he deliberately put that in there, to stir up, to get people talking about his book or to get people to point it out. And not a lot of people pointed it out. So he does. And we all know this, he does this in Thrill of the Chase. He makes deliberate mistakes in the Thrill of the Chase. And I think a lot of us know this. He talks about, if Robert Redford ever would have written a book, he could have done it better than those guys talking about Fitzgerald and Hemingway, right? Mm-hmm. And we know he wrote a book. It's right there, The Outlaw Trail. So that's a deliberate mistake. He knows Robert Redford. So it's a deliberate mistake, or a deliberate, something that's deliberately placed in there or done. There's other deliberate things like, saying that, for whom the bell tolls was about this, and this. And we know that was a completely different book that he had written, right?
Right. And where I feel like he misses the mark on that is, I get that he likes doing that in his previous books. You don't do that in a treasure hunt book. Like right. That is like literally where you're supposed to be finding hints. Like in other like where you find the anomaly, that's where you are supposed to really identify and start digging in, right? And I think that's where he misjudged. Like I think he is like exactly what you're saying. He's having fun, but I think that is so frustrating to somebody that does like treasure hunts, because it's just like that's usually where you find the hints or the clues, right?
Yeah, but some people would.
I lost sound.
Can't hear you, so it's on my end again. There we go.
I can hear you now. I can hear you now. I missed everything you said right after I talked.
Yeah, no, I mean, but those things, these deliberate mistakes that he's making, these are things that he obviously knows are probably wrong. And the funny thing is about him getting the whole book, For Whom the Bell Tolls, wrong. Of course, he says he didn't even read the entire book, and he read about half of it and threw it in the trash. So of course he's going to get it wrong because he didn't think it was important.
Right. But all right. So you make that mistake, right? But now you start looking up Ernest Hemingway, and he wrote that book on the El Barty Ranch right outside of Yellowstone. Yeah. And he also finished the book at another ranch in the Bighorn Mountains.
So this, it's like this circles back then again to what is the box that we're supposed to stay within, right?
Right.
So are we, people are looking outside the box as if the solution lies out there somewhere. So are people looking outside the thrill of the chase? They're looking at these aberrations, like you're stating, that now if we actually read or understood Hemingway and we knew he wrote that book at the Two Dot Ranch or whatever it was where he stayed up there, the El Barty Ranch up there and view of Pilot Peak there in the Beartooth Mountains.
Well, Andy also has one place, and he also wrote that not many people talk about it, in the Bighorn Mountains too. He also had another place
up in Idaho, right?
No, in Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming.
Oh, in Wyoming. Okay, sorry. Yeah. So this again, like this circles back on what is the box that we're supposed to be getting back into, and isn't that? I mean, that's the point of the topic, or
right.
so it's to
And
me.
so,
Go
well,
ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, again, it's all relative, though. I mean, what's the box? The box could be a canyon. The box could be something like, I mean, it's a very easy thing to say, knowing that there's so many different ways to take that statement. Like, it's really to me, it's almost like a non-statement. It's almost like I can say this knowing that there's going to be, because I would think that he would know that there's box canyons all over the place in the search area. I would think that he also would know that a lot of people that are smart would think that, okay, that means simplify. Like, there's so many different ways to take that. He's like, I can say this and I'm not giving him anything.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, he can speak to the whole entire search community because he's privy to all of our emails that we keep sending him. And he could be, I mean, we all think that there's this so-called mystical lead searcher out there. So he theoretically could be writing this, scrapbook or featured Q&A or something, and could be speaking directly to this lead searcher. Well, because all of us read into everything and we see what we want to see in his answers, that we think that he's speaking directly to us.
Right. It's like politics. It's like, think about politics. What polls well? What line? They'll say what line worked well in that debate. Yeah. So they keep saying that line over and over because it affected the most people that was talking to them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of questions going on over here. And Drawing Nye said, when people are elaborating, speculating too much and need to tighten focus on the poem and maps. Well, that's how I think, but that doesn't necessarily mean it.
So what does that mean? What is that? Like, tighten focus? That's another thing. Like, I mean, tighten focus could mean a lot of things. That could mean somebody looking through something. That could mean tighten your focus, like
or to simplify. I mean, it could mean to simplify. It could mean.
I mean, to everybody that means something different, but it means something to everybody, and it's a great way to. Again, it's another non-clue or non-hint.
So let's get to a synopsis of what you're trying to point out with all the different quotes that you're. If you could wrap up and give us a synopsis on what all that means to you, all those quotes, how do you see that?
The way, and the reason that I kind of that I thought it'd be a good topic is this is how, and again, everybody's different. Sean's a poem purist. This is why I feel the way that I feel, as far as I've been thinking about how we're really supposed to, because all I really want to do is learn the rules of the game. If you don't know the rules of the game, it's very hard to play the game, or at least master the game. And so the number one thing that I always try to do is try to figure out what the rules are. And by him giving us all these quotes, that's my way of defining what my rules are going to play this game. So my rules are unlock the clues that are hidden in unlock the 9 clues by using the book that are somehow, which you can unlock somehow within the book.
Right. So are you under let me just ask this question to you. Are you under the interpretation that the hints that are the subtle clues that are scattered amongst the stories help you unlock the correct starting point?
The way that I read his quotes is there are 2 or 3 that literally are the ones that unlock it. It's like literally you go to a certain page for whatever reason, it makes sense that you went to that certain page and you are at where you're at. And it literally is, here's your answer to where warm water's halt.
Sure. And you don't think that can be done with just a poem itself. You think the poem is all the information we need, but in order to unlock that information, we need to understand or isolate the hints.
I think you have to isolate somewhere the answer of where warm water's halts resides, right? And if you're going to play your way, if you're going to do it your way, you have to find it within the poem somehow. It's got to be like you cross the letters, you do something that it's just not arbitrary. Like, it makes sense for a reason. And it spells out warm water's halt is, blah, 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 blah.
Okay. So, but I'm just trying to get to that, trying to nail that down. You think that the subtle hints or the subtle clues that are in the stories or scattered amongst the stories in the book help you unlock the correct either the geographical region or what warm water's halt is.
The way that I read what he tells us is literally you're going to go to the spot where the abstract object gets caught up in your brain, and it's going to be for a reason that, like, there's a theme through all these solves, right? And it's literally going to be, here's where you solve where warm water's halt, and then the general area that you're going to use to solve where warm water's halt.
Right.
You figure out something that's a little trick, And just like a lock, you unlock it, and now you know where Morocco
Right.
solved it. Go on to the next clip.
Right.
Clue
And you
number
don't
two.
think the poem gives you that opportunity, the poem
I
itself.
no, I'm not. I'm saying that I've searched and searched and searched and searched and searched, and I've never been able to figure out what that is. And so I don't think it is. Not to say that there's not. I'm just saying that I haven't been able to find it.
Yeah.
But if you're going to be a poem purist, to me, it would make sense that you have to have that somewhere,
Right,
within the poem.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't mean a poem purist is right. It just means that
Right.
that's the belief that a poem purist has.
Right.
That on that quote that you quoted, and obviously you did a good job of showing the context of it. And I think that, again, we can take it different ways, but
Right.
yeah, no, it's good. It's good debate. So let's get back to this, this whole, what is the box that we should get back in? And what is your interpretation of what that is? And I think this is something, we'll probably agree upon, honestly.
Mm-hmm. So the metaphorical of just simplify to make everything more simple, and go back to the basics.
So what is that box to you?
That's
the metaphorical way.
Metaphorically, it's literally go back to the basics. Like literally get back to the basics.
And what is the basics?
The basics are the quotes that I wrote, as far as just go through. This is how you do it. You go take the hints, solve the poem, go back to the poem.
Yeah. So basically going back to his 2013, some of the quotes you said is go back, read my book,
read the poem,
and
read the book again
6, 8, 10 times, maybe even memorize it, and then go back through the poem. So that should be the box, right?
Yeah, that's what I consider the basics.
Sure. And I would agree with that. I would wholeheartedly agree with that. I think the box is the Thrill of the Chase book. I think this is the box. I think this is the box that we all need to get back in.
That's much better said.
And here's the key to that. I think this is what we need to stay in. The problem is that we, in my opinion, and again, my interpretation of Forrest Fenn's words is not confirmation of his intent. I'm not an authority on the chase. I'm not an expert. I haven't found the treasure. But I believe that him saying, get back in the box, is that we need to stay in that box as well. Because like he says, some people are saying that they're thinking outside the box as if the solution lies out there somewhere. Where is out there but outside this box? If this is theoretically the box that Forrest Fenn is telling us to get back in, then we should stay within that, not go outside of it. So if we're saying that aberrations are things like Hemingway, and that he did it completely wrong, and that aberration leads us to the Beartooth Mountains or Bighorn Mountains or somewhere in there that he was, that's looking into history, looking into people that are mentioned in here and going outside that box. That's just my interpretation of that. And I think that those subtle clues that are sprinkled in these stories might be solved just with the information in here, that you don't need to go outside this in order to understand what those subtle hints are trying to tell us. I think that we have to stay within that. That's my interpretation. I know others vary.
I agree with that, with one exception. I think, and we are talking about who's the guy with the escape rooms. I forget his name.
Well, he goes by Sykeston over on Harris,
right?
But
well, he said something. He said something on the the bash or whatever, for the all-day bash that K-Pro and Salazar was having, that I completely made me think in a different way. And so now, on top of thinking that book, The Thrill That Chases the Box, I also think that a great puzzle maker anticipates what will work and what doesn't work. And so now I'm led to believe that Too Far to Walk literally is to make up for the mistakes that he thinks he made for The Thrill of the Chase. So I think that there's the hints within Too Far to Walk are the things that he saw people having problems within The Thrill of the Chase. Right. So I think that there are some really good hints in there that he was just like, okay, nobody seems to be getting this thing. And so let's put it in Too Far to Walk, just so I can say that it's.
Well, that's kind of like the one answer that he gives in that November 2nd, 2013 interview at Moby Dickens, where he says, I don't think it takes a genius. I mean, if you read my preface, I don't think it takes a genius to figure out what they're talking about. And he's talking about, a lot of people see the fact that him mentioning that the river distance from, where he put into down to Baker's Hole or whatever, or Brown's Hole or whatever, was about 10 miles.
Right.
So people were seeing that, and now he says that is just too far for him to walk. So people were associating that with an answer to a clue. And I think that's where he's talking about in there, where he says, I don't think it takes a genius, if you read my preface, to figure out what these people are talking about.
I think he tells us where how far too far to walk. I don't think it's 10 miles. I don't think you write that book without giving the answer to how far too far to walk is. Right. But I think that he thinks that everybody's going to go to that 10 miles, but I think he answers it somewhere else, if that makes any sense. Like, I think he's like trying to make you look over here, but it's really over here.
Yeah. I haven't spent a whole lot of time in Too Far to Walk. I think I've read it twice, but I read it more for entertainment than trying to find out what I thought a subtle clue was. Cause I did buy it after, I think it was 2016 or 2017. I bought it. And by then I was, mostly being a poem purist than doing those, but I wanted to have that book.
Yeah, I mean, logically to me, I can't hear you. Logically to me, that makes perfect sense. I've been doing this poem. I've made this treasure hunt. I thought that I gave everything, but nobody seems to be getting it. So here I'm going to help them out. Like, logically, that just makes complete sense to me. I can't hear you. Are you?
There you are. You're back. Sorry, it's on my end. It's not yours, and I'll have to get this fixed for next show. So
that's what I got. That's all I had.
No, I think it's good. So again, I personally believe that box that we need to get back in. Like I said, I mean, there's a reason why he said, why didn't he just say, hey, you guys need to get in the box,
Right. And that's a good point to you. Like, yeah, so that means we had to be in the box at one point. So that makes perfect sense why the thrill of the chase would be the box.
Yeah, because back when this first thing started, and people like, people that we know that are known chasers in this, like Stephanie, like Dale, and many others that are out there, and please forgive me if I don't mention your name, but those people, when they first got in this, didn't have, 200 scrapbooks. They didn't have Too Far to Walk. They didn't have two versions of Once Upon a While. They didn't have all these different videos out there. They didn't have, weekly words, random words, surprise words, goofy words. They didn't have none of that stuff. All they had was the Thrill of the Chase book. That's all they had. And a couple of meetings with Forrest and emails back and forth. So, and then as time went on, and he, again, 2000, well, you did a good job of
You froze for me.
2016. I know you probably can't hear me.
I can hear you.
In July 2016, he tells us to get back in the box. And then in the 6 questions of 2017, he tells us no fresh eyes is what this thing is needed. I would advise searchers to look for the clues in my poem and try to marry them on a place on a map. He didn't tell them to go back and read the book. And then in 2018, he turns around in the beginning of 2018, tells us to simplify, and he, in the Playboy interview from July of last year, he tells us again, I've said it several times, people ought to get back in the box. They're stepping on the ants while the elephants go marching by. We're missing what's so obvious, I think, in here, but we keep running outside of it down these rabbit holes. And I love them too, guys. I love going down these rabbit holes with you guys, but I know sometimes that the information I'm researching may not help me find this treasure, but it's still fun. It's still interesting. I learn a lot, right?
That ant thing bugged me.
It doesn't bug Bill Gorman. Bill Gorman loves it.
Well, to an ant, the puddle is a ocean or whatever. Like, he's used the ant thing a couple of times. Like, I don't know if it's just because he equates people, like the searchers, as ants, or which he does. But I'm just saying, like, is that the only reason, or is there something bigger to why he keeps using ants?
I think it's all like he's trying to say, to an ant, a mud puddle can be an ocean. It's all about perspective. You and I look at, an ant, or we look at a mud puddle and we see it as a mud puddle. We look at an ocean and it's an ocean. I mean, it's all about our perspective. And again, it's about people's perspective. If they're focusing on hints in here and then going outside the box on them, are they focusing on the ants and missing the elephant?
What would be because I've given that thought, like, what would be an elephant that's walking by? Like, is that some type of huge hint that he's throwing out? Like, is that the huge elephant that's walking by the ant? Like, if we're the ants, right? If we're the searchers are the ants, and we're flipping over like all the logs or whatever. Well, the ant can't flip over, but you know what I mean. There's a whole bunch of ants. What is he equating? What is the elephant that's walking by us?
To me, I think it's the poem.
Like, what would be a good example of that?
I think it's a poem. I think that without a doubt that the poem is the elephant in the room. I think that's.
So you're thinking that okay, I can see that.
And I think the ants are those small little details that we keep focusing on. We keep focusing on the small things, the little things. These aberrations are what we believe. Again, what trips up in our brain, again, or what we think is an aberration, and what trips up in our brain, and because we're all different people, we're going to see those things, and those things that just catch up in our brain, they're possibly the ants.
Right, but why?
We focus on the little details, and we're missing the big picture, right? The big elephant.
Right, but you say, like, he says big picture, he says the elephant. Like, I mean, there's got to be something that tells us, and this is where I kind of get frustrated, because it's like, what tells us what is the big elephant? Like, what tells us where to focus? Like, what tells us what that is? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what tells us, and I'll keep going because you're froze, but what gives us, there's got to be something that tells us, you're right. You're right. Congratulations. Good job. Right. It's not just, I'm going to look big picture now. I'm going to look into space. I'm looking at such a big picture. Like, I'm going to look like how I would fly a plane, how a pilot would see the world. Now I'm going to look from an ant's perspective, like how the ant would see a world. Like, there's got to be something that tells us which one we're supposed to do within this, right? Or we could just keep rolling the dice and saying, you know what I mean?
Well, I think that's, I think the further we get outside this book, and me being a poem purist and Hooli, yes, I'm talking a lot about the book tonight. It's not that I've always been open to the book. Again, a lot of people know I didn't start out as a poem purist. I started out like pretty much everybody else in this book and going down all these rabbit holes. My experience taught me that I was never going to really figure out the correct starting point if I kept going on all these uncertainties and listening to everybody else, and their things. I had to break away from the herd, so to speak, and get to something what I thought was more focused. I still love the book. I love the stories. I love going down these rabbit holes. So I probably understand the book or know the book just as well as any other average searcher out there, but I'm more poem focused, or poem purity, I should say. I am a poem purist in the fact that I have the belief and faith that all the information we need to find the treasure is in the poem. It's just a matter of perspective. I think it's more difficult to isolate those things that we think are subtle hints or subtle clues in the book with any kind of level of certainty. And we're supposed to move with confidence. We're supposed to move with certainty, right? But if we keep getting these subjective ideas tripped up in our mind, how can we find any objectiveness out of that? I don't know. Somebody please tell me. I just think that the poem is the best way to mitigate all that confirmation bias and remain objective.
Yeah, and I think like if you're confident that you found someplace within the poem that gives you where Warm Water Halt is, like specifically where it is, like there's something that you've worked out, that you've unlocked it. That's the way I can be on board with being nothing but a poem purist, right? Yeah. The only way that I'm different with you is.
But I really don't think anybody's different than that, Justin. I think that most, probably 90% of searchers, or maybe I'm wrong on this, have probably felt that they have figured out the correct starting point with just the poem. But then what they do then is they go outside of the poem and they look for confirmation that they're right. And what they're finding is a bunch of coincidences that give them more confidence that their interpretation is correct. And who's to say they're wrong? Not this guy for certain, but I think that if you're looking outside of the poem for confirmations, you're going to find exactly what you're looking for. But it may not give you confirmation. It may give you confidence, but never certainty or confirmation until you recover the treasure, and then tell everybody, if you choose to, that this is how I solved it. I mean,
right. And that's where I feel, and I'll just speak for me, I feel that a lot of people underestimate just how many places can really work. And really, really, really work. Like, I mean, you can make all 9 clues perfectly line up and it makes sense. I don't think people realize just how many places you can do that with this poem because of the vagueness of the poem. And I think that's why there has to be somewhere where it gives you the specific where Warm Water's Halt is, because there are so many, there's thousands of them that you can literally have. Like, I mean, you can read a lot of those solves on Dalasite and you're like, yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah,
like,
I love reading. I love reading solves because I can totally get it. I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. Like
that completely makes sense. Like, yeah, I get why you looked there. Like that makes complete sense.
But there's some pretty crazy stuff out there too, and I'm like, what?
I mean, there's some stuff that, like, yeah, but I mean, there are.
But they're fun. I enjoy it. Yeah,
there are more than a handful that it's like literally well done. That is a great solve. Like, but what I don't think people realize is you can do that in a lot of places. Like you can have a really great solve in a lot of places along the search area.
You know what I'd like to do is I'd love to do a show one night like a Fensomnia or something and give everybody one of my old solves.
Right.
And I think a lot of people would really like it because I mean you would
a
have
lot of people wouldn't too. Like they're
Oh
also
yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not saying everybody would, but a lot of people would be like, "Oh wow, I could see how that makes sense and how you found all
right.
these aberrations and tied them in together." But to me, when I look at it now, 3 years later, and go, "Holy cow, man! I was just, I was out there looking for confirmations, and I was
Right.
finding exactly what I was looking for,
Right.
confirmations." But there were coincidences. I thought they were confirmations, but they ended up just being coincidences. And guys, I got to apologize to everybody in the chat room. Guys, I've got to tell you, and any other FenTuber will admit to this, it is very hard to have a discussion with a panel member and be able to pay attention to the chat room without missing something that your panel member is saying. So it's not that we're intentionally or I'm intentionally trying to ignore your guys' statements and questions. It's just very difficult to try and pay attention to a conversation and catch you guys. So again, I'd love to go back through here and read some of these questions and statements people are making, because I don't want to, people are taking the time to get in here and make statements, but I apologize, guys. It's very difficult to keep up with that and have a good conversation and stay up with it. Did you have something you wanted to add, Minotaur? Sorry.
Just you mentioned at the beginning of the show, I literally don't have the comments up because I wanted to stay focused on the questions that you're asking in our conversation, and I don't want to like get distracted because I would get distracted if people are like talking, and so I literally can't even see any comment. So I just want to remind everybody that.
Yeah, and Iron says in here, if you focus on his life, meaning Forrest Fenn, then you'll get near his special place. I think Iron is referring to if you know the man, you may know what his special place is, and that's quite possible. I think a lot of people.
I can't hear. I can hear.
Golly, dang it, this sucks. I'll get this fixed, guys. It's just
You
my
just get a second
Wi-Fi thing is like 10 feet over here, but it's on the other side of the wall.
You can get a second. You get a second router. Get a second wireless router.
Yeah,
and that's all you need to do. That will work because I did the same thing.
So we'll probably wrap this up here real soon. I'll try and get this damn thing fixed.
But that was what I wanted to talk about. I thought it was just because there was a lot of stuff to discuss and a lot of stuff to think about.
Yeah.
And I recommend everybody come on and talk about what you want to talk about and just get everybody thinking.
Sure. We've got a few people lined up next week. I've already got committed from Ronnie and Lou from Men Are So Smart. They're going to come on here and we're just going to chat it up and have a good time with those guys and talk about whatever they want to talk about. I think it'll be a good opportunity for people to get to know them in a live show, and they'll be able to answer some live questions. I think that'll be fun. But I think they're great. What I really love about Men Are So Smart is that they are not searchers, and you're getting a very fresh perspective on this whole chase. And I think a lot of people have commented on that, and a lot of people really like and watch those guys because of that. And I think it's very refreshing. I'm sitting here talking to Justin and I, it's some of the same stuff maybe you've heard and stuff, but getting a fresh perspective from somebody who's not really a searcher coming from the outside is great. And I love seeing that. Yeah, Silver Fox, Ryan, I hear what you're saying. Having, somebody like that would be great to help out. And you're right. It's just hard to do that. It just doesn't work in our family element here. Drawing Eye, great show. Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Justin, you got any last stuff you want to part with, or
somebody go find it? I'm sick of thinking about it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, hopefully it made you at least think, even if you disagreed. And again, I think it's all right. That's one thing I can talk about. I think I come from the place where I like to argue and I like to debate and I like to have talk to people that have differing opinions that make me think and make me question if I agree with it or if I don't. And I think as long as you keep that civil, that's good. It's when you start taking it personal, I'll never take it personal. And so I think when people start taking it personal, that's when it can get bad. So just keep it civil. It's all right to debate. Nothing wrong with debating.
Sure. Well, that's it. I mean, a lot of people live in the. I'm going to tell you right now, the forums are a big part of people that live in like-minded bubbles. You get these forums, and they seem more focused on this or that, and sometimes you get people in there have difference of opinions, and that's where people's feelings get hurt, and people get upset, and people get banned or whatever else. You can't there's a right way to say things and a wrong way to say things, and
Right.
you can figure it out really quick. But anyway, great. It was great having you on here, Justin. As always, we love having you as a guest. We didn't get to make a bet tonight. You want to make a friendly bet? What do you want to bet on?
I don't know. I'm thinking $1,000.
I'm thinking $1.
No, I'm good.
Right on. Well, guys, it's been a fun night. Again, this show is called Flip the Script. It's where you get to come on as the guest and pick any topic you want to talk about, and that's the topic we'll discuss for that evening. And no matter what, we'll have fun. We'll go down that rabbit hole with you, whatever it is. Like to keep it chase related. That's the way we like to do it. We like to stay away from some of the drama that goes on out there. But you know what? It's the flip side, and we talk about whatever, I guess. So who knows? All right, guys. We appreciate you guys coming out tonight and hanging out with us. And the next show will be next Tuesday. Again, we're going to have Men Are So Smart. I haven't gotten a topic yet from them and what they want to talk about, but we'll have Ronnie and Lou on here. We're going to do a test with them here later this week, make sure everything works and goes good. And I've got a few other people lined up for the next few weeks. But if you are interested in coming on the show and talking about whatever topic you want to talk about, you can email me. My email's right up here. It's seannm@hotmail.com. Send me an email. Let's chat it up and let's try and set something up. So without any further ado, we will catch you all on the flip side. Good night, guys. I can end this. Oh, not that one. Stop over here.